So shout out to Jimmy Dore for covering this first. He's kind of where I got all this stuff from, and we're going to play a little bit of one of his videos later. But he showed this article from 2021, I believe, called "The Secret History of the Shadow Campaign That Saved the 2020 Election." Saved the 2020 election, meaning there was a shadow campaign that didn't let Trump win. It stifled the will of the people for democracy. Not that Trump was the will of the people. But this is an incredible article. An incredible article. Lots of bombshells or lots of crazy things just dropped in here and said, or dropped in here as if they're normal things to say. So you'll see what I mean. This is where things really start to get weird. Really start to get weird. There was a conspiracy. Let me zoom in a little bit so y'all can read this. Sorry. There was a conspiracy unfolding behind the scenes, one that both curtailed the protests and coordinated the resistance from CEOs. Both surprises were that the result of an informal alliance between left-wing activists. I gotta zoom out one so I can make sure I read this. Left-wing activists and business titans. An informal alliance between left-wing activists and business titans. The pact was formalized in a terse, little-noticed joint statement of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and AFL-CIO published on Election Day. Both sides would come to see it as a sort of implicit bargain inspired by the summer's massive, sometimes destructive, racial justice protests in which the forces of labor came together with the forces of capital to keep the peace and oppose Trump's assault on democracy. The forces of labor came together with the forces of capital to prevent Trump from taking power and protect our sacred democracy. And what they mean by left-wing activists and by the forces of labor coming together with capital, they mean social democrats like AOC, right? They mean American progressives pretending to be socialists but actually serving the ruling class. They mean union bureaucrats, like the bureaucrats at the head of the AFL-CIO and the other unions who aren't actually part of the rank-and-file workers. They're openly talking about an alliance between big business, between corporate investors, between Wall Street, and the people who pretend to be leftists, the people who pretend to advocate for the working class. So they say that they make sure that the election remains free and uncorrupted. And apparently this author is so blinded by Trump derangement syndrome and liberal ideology that they can't see how CEOs and business titans doing a shadow campaign to control the election and decide who wins is corruption. That's literally the argument they're making, is that there was a shadow campaign. That's to use their words, not mine. There was a shadow campaign waged by the ruling elite in this country, the dominant economic class, the capitalist class, to decide who won the election. And that is what protected democracy, or that is what kept the election, quote unquote, free and uncorrupted. So business titans using their wealth to control the election isn't considered corruption? Then what the hell is corruption? Apparently, I don't even know what corruption is. So the article says that they successfully pressured social media companies to take a harder stance on disinformation, which they call a bipartisan triumph of American democracy. So like Midwestern Marks being banned on TikTok 7 times, is that misinformation, even though everything we were saying on TikTok was true? And it's crazy that they're saying this now, or that they're saying businesses and left-wing activists collaborated for the shadow campaign to protect democracy by pressuring people off social media, by pressuring social media companies. Because recently we've had the story, of course, the story about Hunter Biden's laptop. I'll start with that one, where Mark Zuckerberg admitted to Joe Rogan that they censored this story around election time because the FBI pressured them to. Right? So blatant censorship, blatantly withholding information from the American public in order to influence the election, which is apparently to protect corruption and protect democracy. It's not considered corruption and, you know, subverting democracy anymore, because if the liberals do it, it's always okay and right. If they do it to stop Trump, then it's all right, because Trump, is the only thing that can be anti-democratic, apparently. But then we also have stories like this, where there was a left-wing think tank, which was a liberal think tank made up of the likes of Bill Kristol, Michael McFaul, Obama-era higher-ups, Clinton ally John Podesta. So the typical figures, typical Democratic Party elites who aren't really left-wing, but either way, they just got caught pressuring Twitter to delete thousands of accounts, claiming that they were Russian bots. And none of them were actually Russian bots. They were pressuring Twitter just to ban and cancel any account that was giving a narrative that the Democratic Party didn't like, the Democratic elites didn't like, and censoring them, falsely claiming they were Russian bots. So we just found out about all of this mass social media censorship designed to control the election. Basically, what the Democrats accused Russia of doing in 2016 to defeat Hillary, right? Remember, they accused Russia of controlling social media with a bunch of Russian bots. Basically, they controlled social media using their money, wealth, and influence. And they're admitting it, that there was this secret shadow campaign. And then they're talking about how this saved democracy. But this is the most corrupt example of ruling class elites controlling democracy and influencing political democracy that I've ever seen. How is this protecting democracy just because it led to Trump losing? And that's why I say the author is blinded by Trump derangement syndrome, but it's crazy. And it's a perfect example of how democracy in a liberal capitalist system is just a shell. It's just a shell or a sham that protects the capitalist dictatorship. They talk about democracy, but when they say democracy, it means the opposite. It literally means the exact opposite. We're protecting democracy by controlling what you're allowed to see and say. And we're protecting democracy by withholding real information, like the Hunter Biden laptop story, while feeding you BS information and banning anybody, falsely accusing them of being Russian bots who would want to tell you the truth. Like our TikTok got banned today. Our 7th account got banned. And then these liberals are now giving themselves a pat on the back. Oh, we protected democracy by banning 7 of Midwestern Marx's accounts for telling people the truth. No, you guys are the reason we don't have a democracy. You guys are the dictators. You guys are the corruptors, right? You're not fighting corruption. You are the corruption. But that's just liberal arrogance for you to spend a bunch of money to control and push an election to go a certain way. Like, we did it. We saved democracy by controlling that election and not letting the people decide who they wanted. Oh my gosh, it's insane. And now the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability is investigating this shadow campaign because they're like, this is actually corruption. This is illegal, is what a lot of people are saying. And progressives, left-wing activists who sided with big business because they had to defeat Trump, apparently, are doubling down on what they did and praising themselves for protecting democracy. So let's watch this video here.
And so this is what AOC has. So they're admitting it. Twitter is admitting they made a mistake. They did the wrong thing. They censored someone in a bogus way. So watch this.
By other news outlets that hope to corroborate reporting, as many did. The newspaper wasn't sharing what it obtained. New York Post had this alleged information and was trying to publish it without any corroboration, without any backup information.
Why don't they just say many experts like AOC and then corroborate how she does? Many experts say that's stochastic. What experts?
You mean they were trying to file an accurate story.
Trying to protect sources?
We now know it's an accurate story. And so you want someone to...
You guys catch that? She's supporting like the FBI, the intelligence agencies, the armed bodies of the capitalist state, censoring media outlets like the New York Post, saying these stories weren't corroborated, which they were. You know, these were accurate stories like the ones about Hunter Biden's laptop. I'm sorry, right? I know it's inconvenient when you're trying to push this idea that Joe Biden's the savior of America, that his son is, you know, involved in a bunch of corrupt business dealings in Ukraine, and is also, you know, basically has been allowed to be a very irresponsible drug addict while still being a multimillionaire and never being punished for his crimes, while meanwhile, the prisons are filled with poor people who got busted for nonviolent drug offenses. I know that's an inconvenient truth for the Democrats, but it's true. But because it's inconvenient, AOC says, no, it's not true. And it's okay for the capitalist dictatorship, for the state to censor media outlets who want to report on it. This is leftism, or this is progressivism today. This is where progressivism leads us. And this is why we need Marxism.
So what she's doing is saying Twitter is a publisher, which they're not supposed to be, because you can sue a publisher. You can't sue Twitter. You can't sue a bookstore if there's something bad in a book. You have to sue the publisher. So that's where Twitter gets that.
Yeah, it's just a platform where anyone can say anything. So you could sue someone for a tweet where they defame you in a tweet, but you can't sue the platform because it's supposed to be an open platform for debate and discussion, says the guy who just had his 7th TikTok account banned for telling the truth and trying to engage in debate and discussion.
That exemption, just like Facebook, they get that exemption from being considered publishers. They can go censor and decide what to publish, and they're not considered publishers. Why? Because the government knows they can make them do what they want. That's why. Here we go. But she's now pretending that the story was bogus with her big glasses. Watch this.
They were trying to publish it to Twitter. Twitter did not let them, and now they were upset. I believe that political operatives who sought to inject explosive disinformation with the Washington Post couldn't get away with it.
She's using all the buzzwords too. Disinformation. They wanted to spread disinformation and Twitter wouldn't let them. And now they're mad. Where's the outrage about the last story I showed AOC? Where's the outrage about the Democratic think tank, the think tank connected to your party, who is pressuring Twitter to ban all these different accounts like ours for being Russian bots when they weren't Russian bots? Right? Where's your outrage about that? But she's not outraged about that. And in fact, she's saying it's good that Twitter was banning all these people. It's good that Twitter was preventing all these people from sharing the story because this Hunter Biden laptop story wasn't true. Or whatever story she's talking. I think that's the story she's discussing here, which is, like I said, a true story. I know you can just call anything disinformation nowadays. That's the new liberal buzzword. This person who claims to be a socialist is saying that the capitalist dictatorship should work together with the capitalist social media companies, the Silicon Valley oligarchs, to censor certain stories, right? And she's doubling down on it and being like, oh, these Republicans are just so mad they couldn't spread their disinformation. First of all, it wasn't all Republicans. It's not all conservatives who have been censored. Like I said, we've been censored countless times. And we have evidence that the ruling class has been working with Twitter, and the FBI, who has a terrible history of suppressing the masses, have been working with these social media companies to suppress things that are true, that are proven as fact. But then you're going to come here in front of the American public and say that Twitter and the FBI and all these organizations are only censoring disinformation? She's running interference for the FBI and the U.S. intelligence agencies. And
now they're livid. And they want the ability to do it again. They want the ability to inject this again.
She's pretending like the Hunter Biden laptop is disinformation. She's just repeating a lie. She's just lying. Like she didn't get the memo. We've known this for a while. Hunter Biden admits it was his laptop. They all admit. The guy at Twitter just admitted.
Which half was fake of the story? I believe she said it was half fake.
She's going to say it in a second.
So they've dragged a social media platform here in Congress. They're weaponizing the use of this committee so that they can do it again. A whole hearing about a 24-hour hiccup in a right-wing political operation. That is why we are here right now. And it's just an abuse of public resources, an abuse of public time. We could be talking about healthcare.
And she tries to scapegoat the Republicans, right? She tries to scapegoat the Republican. This is just to call it a right-wing thing. This is just the right-wingers who are mad because the pro-capitalist, pro-imperialist Democratic Party was censoring anybody who's critical of them, was working together with the social media oligarchs to ban anybody who's critical of the Democratic Party and call them a Russian bot, even though they're not. This is just a right-wing thing. No, this is holding your party accountable. This is, trying to hold the bourgeoisie accountable. And I know this committee hearing will lead to nothing. And I know the Republicans don't actually care that much about free speech, and they only care about the Hunter Biden laptop story because it makes Joe Biden look bad. Right? But that doesn't mean it's all just part of some right-wing plot. We know that liberal think tanks were pressuring Twitter, and the FBI was pressuring Facebook to censor certain stories and control the election. That is subverting democracy. That is a shadow campaign to subvert democracy that the Times article that we just looked at was talking about openly. Right? You can't just say this is some right-wing thing. I'm allowed to censor anybody, and whoever criticizes me is just a right-winger. And she says, we could be talking about healthcare. Why didn't you do force the vote then? Why didn't you tell Nancy Pelosi you weren't going to vote for her for Speaker of the House unless they brought up Medicare for all, unless they brought up the conversation about healthcare? Well, you didn't do that, and you said you didn't do it because you didn't want to cause reputational harm and relational harm, because it's more important to cozy up to Nancy Pelosi than it is to get people healthcare. But then when, you know, the Republican Party happens to notice some corruption in the Democratic Party and call it out, you're like, oh, we should be talking about healthcare instead. Okay. Okay, Alexandria.
Prescription drugs. We could be talking about abortion rights, civil rights, voting rights, but instead we're talking about Hunter Biden's half-fake laptop story. I mean, this is an embarrassment.
What's actually embarrassing is how much of a mask just came off of you right there.
No shit, Jimmy. No kidding. This is why people love Jimmy Dore, because you know the Majority Report, and maybe Kyle Kalinske will cover this, but probably not. But a lot of these progressive outlets, you know, aren't going to cover this. They're not going to criticize AOC for this, even though she's quite literally running interference for the U.S. intelligence agencies and for censorship designed to control elections. I mean, a mask slip is right. That was the mask slipping off right there. It's the, like that Times article that said there's an alliance between left-wing activists and business titans, right? AOC's mask just slipped, and we saw the connection between left-wing activists and business titans. She's called out about the FBI and different corporations and Democratic think tanks pressuring social media companies to control the election, and she decides to run interference for them and say that anybody who's mad about this corruption and anyone who's mad about this censorship is just a right-winger, is just, you know, part of some right-wing plot to attack me. And no, I'm a Marxist. I'm as far left-wing as you can get, AOC, and I've been banned 7 times, and I'm sick of it. And then here you are, this person who's supposed to be a socialist, who's supposed to be on our side, who's supposed to be for the workers, running interference for the intelligence agencies, and saying that it's just a plot by, trying to hold the Democratic Party accountable and these social media companies accountable for their censorship is nothing but a right-wing plot to protect disinformation. I forgot about that buzzword, right? Maybe I should have been banned. I was talking about the war in Ukraine that AOC keeps voting to prolong and exacerbate. So, you know, I've been spreading disinformation. I shouldn't be allowed to do that. Because if the Democrats do something, it is okay and it is actually good. And if the Democrats do something bad, it's actually the opposite. If the Democrats infringe on your freedom of speech so that they can control the election and subvert democracy, they're actually protecting democracy, because otherwise Trump would have won. How does that make any sense? I don't know, but liberals still believe this shit, and progressives somehow. And yeah, like the Hunter Biden laptop story, like I said, I know it's inconvenient for the Democrats, and I'm not, you know, there's a lot of Republicans and Trump people who, you know, just want to dunk on Biden. Yeah, there's a lot of MAGA people who just want to make fun of Hunter Biden for being a drug addict, right? But there's a lot of legitimate stuff in that laptop, like his business dealings in Ukraine, that should have been public information before we voted on the new president, before we voted on the leader of our country. If we actually had a democracy, you know, something like that would be very important. It would definitely matter, which is why the Democrats spent so much energy covering it up and censoring that story. Right? And AOC just says, oh, because it's Biden, who the story was directed at, and because it's MAGA people and because it's Trump who benefited or who would have benefited from having the story released, therefore censorship's okay. And subverting democracy is actually protecting democracy. It is freaking insane. And The last thing about the Hunter Biden laptop, yeah, there have been, there are a lot of right wingers who just want to attack him for being addicted to drugs, which is a health issue, and something that's terrible and sad and destroys lives. So I'm not in favor of just, mocking people for being drug addicts and saying, why don't you fix it yourself? 'Cause a lot of people are born into horrible situations, whatever. There's lots of reasons people get hooked on drugs and it destroys lives. But Hunter Biden has been a drug addict for the last 25 years. And when you read the contents of that laptop, he's been in and out of rehab, but every time he gets caught doing drugs, nothing happens, right? He continually fails upward, right? His punishment for getting caught doing drugs is he gets to sit on the board of some Ukrainian energy firm and collect millions of dollars for doing nothing. Right? That's what he does. He collects millions of dollars because he owns capital in various places, which the laptop exposed. Even though he's been doing nothing and has been addicted to drugs and acting extremely recklessly for years. Now, I wouldn't mind that he's addicted to drugs. I wouldn't even bring that up, except for the U.S. has 24% of the world's prison population in our country right now, and many of those people are locked up for drugs. Because partially Joe Biden's crime bill. Because Joe Biden, while he was in Congress, pushed and pushed and pushed for harder sentences on nonviolent drug offenders. He pushed to lock people in the slammer. He went and gave a speech in front of Congress saying that, if we don't lock up more of these drug dealers, if we don't strengthen the police and strengthen the prisons and get tougher on nonviolent drug offenders, they're going to come for your family. These violent criminals are going to come for you. And that's why we Democrats need to be tough on crime and get them off the streets. Meanwhile, his son is running around doing crack while collecting millions of dollars from a Ukrainian energy firm or from whatever places that he gets to own capital in or be on the board of because his dad's Joe Biden. So, yeah, that matters. That really matters. That makes the Biden family look horrible, which is why they didn't want this story leaked before the election. But it's true. It's facts. Joe Biden is the reason that your cousin or your friend or your whatever is in jail doing prison labor right now for a nonviolent drug offense, but his son is allowed to collect millions of dollars and never get in trouble for doing crack. That's why that story matters, and that's why it's not just a right-wing thing to be mad about the intelligence agencies and the corporations and the social media oligarchs censoring the laptop story. And as we pointed out today, there's far more examples of ruling class censorship of various stories, including those related to the 2020 election, right? And we should be against that across the board, not just when it's convenient for our political team. AOC.